welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by NetCertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. NetCertive talks shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Erin Martin, and this episode is brought to you by NetCertive. Today, our guest is Robert Mitchell, the Chief AI Officer at WSI, a digital marketing agency and franchisor, who is one of the largest digital marketing agency networks in the world. Robert, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I think to kick us off, maybe you can unpack your title, your role, and WSI for us to give us some context.
Yeah, great. So WSI has been a world leader in digital marketing since 2 years before Google, so almost 30 years now. But we're a learning organization. We have been since its inception. Dan Monahan, the founder, really pushes this for the last 30 years. And what that means is that every time a new technology comes out, whether it be SEO or websites or Facebook and social media, WSI's had to pivot, had to modify their deliverables and be relevant to the client base. Nothing has been more true of that than AI. So recently, over the last 3 years, and we were using AI in our back end when we were delivering solutions to clients, but because it got so popular and the model and the architecture was a little bit more approachable, we dove in head first. We adapted, we tested, we red team, blue team, every teamed models to create what we feel like is the best AI adoption roadmap on the market so that our franchise owners, which are traditionally digital marketing experts, now can be AI consulting experts using our framework. So that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years, is testing and trying it out. And it's been fun.
Yeah, I bet. And when I think of that context, there's two buckets that come to mind for me. There's number one, like AI expertise in general that you probably have a wealth of. But then it's also a whole different ballpark when you're trying to scale something or create playbooks using AI. So there's almost like those two things that are happening at work. So I'm curious on that latter. Like, how do you guys start to build? What does a playbook, AI playbook, and some of the top tools that people need to be incorporating in their roadmap look like?
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's a few assumptions that we made when we're working with clients. And the first is that you can't start using AI tools unless you first understand policy, governance, and best use cases. Like, you don't want to just throw your employees to the wolves and say, go use AI, because there's some risks inherent in using the tools. And you also don't want those tools to produce output and just push them out to the end client or to social media or whatever without a human oversight. So there's a little bit of training that we've developed on the front end before we even talk about the solutions you mentioned, right? But that's the beauty of working with an expert. I'm not trying to tout my own hat, but our organization knew, because we did it ourselves. We fell on our face, we tried it ourselves, we played around with tools internally before we launched to clients. We learned what was the best way to tackle AI from our own use cases. And when our clients came to us and said, you're using it, so can you help me use it? So going back to your question, though, some of the things that people need to realize when they're adopting AI is the first thing I mentioned. Don't do it unless you have a policy and a strategy at the front end. But it needs to be a whole organizational change. So leadership needs to get on board to adopt a new vision through the lens of an AI kind of roadmap. And why that's so important is because it touches every role, every workflow, every task of every company in the world. And so you can't just say, let's build an AI tool for sales, because then you're being short-sighted and the rest of the teams don't work with this huge efficiency leap, right? If you're familiar with the theory of constraints, when you fix a little bottleneck in an organization, that's great. Then that throughput is faster. You're going to cause other bottlenecks. So if you only fix one area of the company, the others are going to cause bottlenecks for that really efficient department, if you get my meaning. We believe that integrating AI is about a whole company-wide strategy. And then we look at the other approach. So that was the top-down mentality, right? The leadership strategy. The bottom up, no offense to the people in the trenches, but the people doing the work, knowing the problems, knowing the workflows, those are the people we really need to talk to and work with to build those special tools. But I'm not sure that answers your question, but that's the first thought.
Yeah. And what are some of those risks or downfalls that you see without taking that approach? Because there's a lot of brands I talk to where either they were hesitant up front to be sharing proprietary information into chat bots and different things, and so never tested AI or got into it, and now feel like they might be behind the curve. So with this, how do you dabble and play and figure out what can work and balance the risk with it? So I don't know, what kind of specific risks would you alert people to be aware of?
Yeah, so risk is there's several different ways I look at risk. I'm not a lawyer, so lawyers will look at risk in a different way. But we work with lots of clients, not just in the franchising industry. So a lot of our clients are maybe banks or healthcare. They have to deal with, we call it personal identifiable information, PII, and they handle lots of credit card information, social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, all those kind of things. So you would think that's probably information you don't want to share in the general public. So using the tools, now I do want to do a pause here. I always say this when I'm talking to people about risks. The inherent risk of losing a large language model like a ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Claude or whatnot, there isn't a risk that are traditionally, like if you were to load your information, your social security number, Aaron, into a language model, and I were to log into that same language model and say, what is Aaron's social security number? It won't know it, because that's not how, it doesn't store a data set that you can then access from another user base. That's not how the language models work. They're trained on semantic association through hundreds of documents, thousands, millions of documents. So I'm just doing a little caveat there, but here's the but. Those language models are hackable, just like Google or Target or any other. Nefarious actors could hack that log that you just did. I just put in my social security number as Aaron into this log that ChatGPT does save. And that is a risk that you do not want your staff doing, okay? Even though they're pretty secure and whatnot. What we suggest is, in order to mitigate that risk, is build your own language model instance, which is very easy to do through an AWS or a similar kind of cloud that's vectorizing the data, which completely protects everything. So that's the risk that is mainly considered a big one with PII and all the information. Now, another kind of risk in a different sense is your marketing team. They want to use a language model to produce, I don't know, some really good content that they want to copyright. Whoa. The word copyright is something that we need to be really clear on. The U.S. Copyright Office just recently, about a month ago, released their second part of their position on AI and copywriting. So in order to get something copyrighted, you have to make sure that you are 90% the author of it if you do use AI. Before, they had made a stance that if AI is used in any part of the development or creation of a copyrightable work, it was not copyrightable. But now they've modified that a little bit, says as long as there's a human in most of it. So the reason I'm saying all this, Aaron, is that's another risk. You need to educate your team on what you can and cannot do with AI.
Yeah. And the building your own language model, definitely go back to that then. You said it's simple. That's honestly the first time I've heard of that approach, which sounds amazing, not to mention that then it's learning your specific brand, the language, which oftentimes these things do already. And so break down that process to what would a marketer, like layman's terms, do to set that up?
I'm not sure a marketer would, but a larger organization that wants to have all of their communications and their interactions, that would be what you would do. But let me just put it bluntly. I want to be clear that so people who are listening are going to call me out. I'm not saying building a language model per se. You're going to use a language model and you're going to fine tune that language model either through RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, or other additional data points to augment the language. So basically the language model lives on the bottom of a pyramid that understands human language. You're going to use that functionality. You're going to understand, it knows what Robert walked to the store means, right? Then the next layer is oh, here's my machine or my manufacturing widgets that I make and the specifications of that widget that aren't in the language model. So you'll add that to that next layer so that when a request comes in, it will go through the first one to understand English, the second one to understand your product, and then it'll produce the output. So you build that inside of a vectorized database. So the ins and outs are completely secure. So in that
Yes.
sense, right.
Yeah. And the parallel that my brain goes to for this is almost like how we use Google Business Suite or Microsoft Outlook as a company-wide tool that
Mhm.
have safeties and security things in place for then everybody to be more efficient and productive. Is
That's a
that an
really,
okay
yeah,
parallel?
that's another good parallel. Exactly. So I'm see, we're an agnostic or a brand agnostic kind of company. So we don't like to build tools only in Google or only in Microsoft because there's a lot of companies that don't live in that kind of ecosystem. But you're right. There are lots of companies, banks specifically, that live in Microsoft 365. And so everything we build for those clients are inside of their platform, and it's brilliant because all those documents are safe, secure, and behind a firewall and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, those documents are really easily accessible in that sense.
Yeah,
100%.
and I think the key of what you're saying there and your earlier point is it's a whole network-wide systematic adoption. Don't just test a little tool over here, embed it into your company's way of doing things in a secure and smart way. Otherwise, you're going to
Yes.
have everyone doing everything.
And it's funny you say that because what we're hearing right now from all the news articles or the experts out there, when I say experts, not me per se, but KPMG, the McKinsey's, the PwC's reports, they're saying adoption is not where we thought it was going to be. Because what we're
Mm,
seeing from the surveys, even our surveys that we do from our network, because we have hundreds of thousands of clients that we can also survey as well. But what we are seeing is that they played around with it, but they didn't know how to scale it. They used
yeah.
ChatGPT, they used the basic tools to do recraft this email, help me with this proposal, just really fun stuff that people really saw big extractions out of. But they weren't able to scale it across a whole organization because they didn't have functions or methods by which to train their team, and they didn't take it to the next level. If you use ChatGPT for the same task more than once a week, that should be an automation. You shouldn't have to reprompt the dang ChatGPT on the same thing. If you do it more than once a week, that can be an automation that is done as part of your workflow. So that's where this true extractions come from. You mentioned across the whole organization. It's like we saw that guy who spoke, I forgot the author's name, so my apologies, but at the IFA, Atomic
James
Habits.
Clear.
Yeah, Atomic Habits. 1%. Give me a 1% here, 1% here. That is what we're talking about. And let me tell you, we're more than 1%. So when we do a training session for our clients, we survey the employees, not the leadership, the employees afterwards, like a month later. So what'd you think? Do you think you're more efficient? Average response is 20% more efficient in their day-to-day work from just a training and workshop, opening their eyes, light bulb moments across the classroom. And that's huge. Now, one caveat, that 20% is just like any other bottleneck that we just opened up. A year from now, you're not going to have another 20%. You got to find that
Mhm.
somewhere else. But you just made a huge improvement in your organization, though.
Oh, yeah. And what are those major buckets then for opportunities for scale? Like when I think of the natural use cases that a whole company could use, not just the marketing team, it's like content rewrites to have it a little bit more polished, it's data analysis and deep research. Is there any
Mhm.
other, what's the main kind of use cases for those often used prompts, I'll call them?
Yeah,
That
that you're making a
people
good point. A lot of what our digital marketers are using it for is, I give you an example that's it's in the middle of what I just described. In the middle means you have the using ChatGPT for this, and then there's on the other end of the spectrum is build a full-blown automation for it. But in the middle of that is building a GPT, and that's a pre-programmed, pre-trained version of a ChatGPT interaction. Okay, so it's called custom GPTs, and a lot of our digital marketing owners will have one for each one of their clients. that they're responsible for doing social media posts or blog content or whatever that's trained on that client. So I'm going to go into ABC company. It's like, oh, it's the 1st of January. It's time for their blah, blah, blah post. And we'll just go, and it knows all the previous posts. It's trained on all the language of every interaction and the voice, the mission, vision, and value statements, all that stuff. If you had to do that every week or every month and add the prompt, that'd be a pain in the butt. So this is an example of a GPT that was created for each individual client. You pull it up, and that GPT can be shared across the company. So if they have other employees that are doing, oh, you do Facebook posts or you do blog posts, you can just share that with all of the different employees. So
yeah, and how that translates for me is for marketing teams, there's some things that we know we need every month or every quarter. We're refreshing advertising, social posts, whatever it may be. But there's also some large projects that we think of as every other year we'll do a big thing, and wonder if you could just have that support to train to always keep it refreshed or bring new ideas to the front. For example, websites. Sometimes they're just refreshed or redone every few years. Messaging and positioning. You do a deep customer study to make sure your positioning is up to date every year or two. There's these big projects where all of a sudden we could probably be able to just stay on top of what are new ideas to refresh our positioning so it's the best in the market and truly differentiates us. Like, always ask that question, always get ideas, and have it be an always on and always improved and the best that it can be than these like every 2-year projects.
that's actually a good idea. Let me give you another little hack for that people are using ChatGPT for. There's one called tasks, right? There's also a functionality called deep research. So you combine those two. So what you're explaining is we got to stay on top of our content and our web update kind of situation, right? What does that mean? That means also understanding our competition and where they position themselves in the marketplace. So what would be a smart way to do a task, and what tasks are basically you set up this reoccurring automation inside of ChatGPT. For me, I did one called AI News. Every morning at 8 a.m., it runs the prompt. It gives me all the stuff in the last 24 hours for AI News. It gets emailed to me. You can set one task up for analyze my competition. Find out where are they showing up in social media over the last month or 2 months. And where do I compare? You could set up all kinds of interesting automated prompts just inside of ChatGPT for that. On the flip side, like you said, once every quarter or year, you'll do some kind of major update. Then you go into deep research mode, and Gemini's got one, Perplexity's got one. They all have a deep research. Even X or Grok 3 now has one. I ran one just before this call, but this particular deep research allows you to really understand a topic, competitor, landscape, you name it. So that can give you real insights onto how you need to reposition your brand. So.
Yeah, a lot of cool creative approaches and ideas, I think, there. Because especially as franchise marketers, there's always the tug or the push and pull of working in the business versus on the business. And obviously you want to work on the business more often. And I hear so much from marketers, we really need to do this. We really need to do this. And it's a future initiative. We don't have time yet. Later on down the line, we'll make it an initiative. It's pop that initiative into some AI tools that give you ideas now, like that 1% every day. There's a different way of doing it these days.
And you mentioned time. For a marketer, there's never been a better time frame moment in the history of technology for marketers, at least, because AI can do so much of what they were doing. And I'm not taking away from their IP, intellectual property or value they bring to clients, but they're just going to be able to do more with less. And that's going to enable them to do some of these time pressing activities that you mentioned. So marketers who are not leaning into AI are really going to be on the chopping block. They're really going to be irrelevant pretty soon if they don't get updated. I say the biggest benefactors of this technology are those who are willing to learn and teach themselves. AI is so approachable now. It is not like learning Python code, which people don't even know what that is typically. This literally, I can watch a YouTube video on how to use this software program called N8N, and within an hour, I could have built my own tool that is very sophisticated that would take me a team of programmers a few years ago. So let me just tell you, it's very approachable, and it's human language. Typically, some of these models, you can just tell it what you want and it can build it for you. So a little bit of curiosity goes a long way.
Yeah. And I do want to pick your brain on the language models because this is one thing where, yeah, if you go into ChatGPT, Perplexity, you've got a million drop downs to select what model you want based off of output. So, what's happening behind the scenes, and how should we think about which one we choose for what task or output we want?
We just recently did a report. Well, I didn't. One of our colleagues in the company, Seamus, did. It was a brilliant report on all the models and why you'd use one over the other. Of course, it's an internal document for our network. So if you want to become a WSI franchise owner, or we have a new AI consulting model that you can be a licensed owner of AI consulting, we teach you how to be an AI consultant. So if there's interest in that, reach out to me. But just as a quick hack, because I have each one of the models on my top left of my browser, and each one of them has its own tab. And just yesterday, I was with some friends, and I used all 4 of them or 5 of them I have to do a particular task. And some performed great, some didn't. So, for example, I wanted just recently, just today, I wanted to find out what AI reports have been released recently in the last 6 months. Like I want the big, studies on AI in business, and I want to know what they're saying. All these, different companies, McKinsey's and Deloitte, those kind of things, right? So I reached out to X on Grok, and I clicked the deep research button. I said, I need you to find me links to all the reports in the last 6 months on AI, and go. And it did a brilliant job of finding them, summarizing them, and identifying which one of the reports in different elements of the reports, why one is better than the other, kind of thing. It analyzed them for context. And then I went to Gemini and did the same thing. And it gave me 2 different reports. But Claude, you wouldn't do that with. That's not how you use it. It doesn't have that functionality. ChatGPT does have deep research, but it's only for the pro users right now, so I couldn't have access to it yet. So that's an example of something that you want to really deep research a topic. But I will tell you, Aaron, I know you asked the question, but in the very near future, it's not going to matter. In the very near future, the models will be able to do everything. Remember, a year ago,
Thank goodness.
yeah, yeah. And a year ago, they were segmenting themselves. Like even ChatGPT, if you want the image generator model, then use the pull down menu for image generation. If you want to do advanced data analysis, then select that model. That's going away. Even from Sam Altman's tweet recently, he mentioned that we're going to have GPT-5. It's going to be the one-stop shop for everything. So I think that's a question we'll eventually not have to ask anymore. But right now, there are some tools that are better than others. By the very nature, to your point, Aaron, the data sets. For example, X has got instant access to all these tweets. And if you know anything about Twitter or tweets or X, whatever, that's like instant knowledge. Like if there is a war going on in some other country, you're going to see it on X before you can see it anywhere else. And so being able to access that data set with a Grok 3 language model is some serious IP. Like they're going to have something that none of their other models are going to have. I'm curious how that's going to go.
Yeah, I need a cheat sheet for it all because that's where my next question was headed, was like, it's like a streaming wars. There's just fragmentation of everything and figuring out the different tool for the right thing here and there is insane. So your prediction of everything's going to consolidate and be one-stop shop is music, I think, to everybody's ears.
Yes. I mean, that's the direction it's going. And then what you'll probably have is you'll have at the top of the food chain, you'll have an AI triage agent. I call it a triage agent. And it's basically, it will understand the context of your request, and then it'll go to an agent specific for that. Each agent will, underneath the hood, it'll have all these specialists that will be, oh, you're really good at understanding math, you're good at coding, you're good at understanding the weather, you're good at recipes. They're going to have all these agents that are going to be built as part of the model. So that's why I'm saying eventually the user interface, the first prompt, will be a triage agent.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I like the idea of the bake-off because I've similarly done same thing, especially when it comes to research. Pop something in ChatGPT versus Perplexity's deep research and seeing the output of what comes out. I personally love Perplexity I have the team version. I don't forget what it's called, enterprise, just
Hmm.
like $20 a month version, and love it. The accuracy I think is great. It's helped with anything I've needed, whether it's like content rewrites or research or analysis. It's done a great job with all of them.
That's
Uh,
curious. Interesting.
but I don't know if you have a
Yeah.
favorite. Like, what are your go-tos?
Yeah, so found Perplexity a little bit dirty. Like it isn't. It's too busy, and I love the cleanliness and the ability to get to the point fast and clean without a bunch of other stuff on the sidebars. I don't know. Just something about it is aesthetically not as pleasing
Just the UI.
as
Yeah.
yeah, ChatGPT and Claude. Now it is important, as you mentioned a second ago, to understand that although these models are built upon the original architecture, which is the transformer architecture from Google from 2017, they're all iterating and adapting in different ways. That's why I think I would encourage everybody, don't have a favorite, try them all for whatever use case you're doing and see which one outputs what you're wanting, because that's where I find that sometimes Claude is really shines above all the others, and because it's a constitutional AI, it's built differently than the language models of ChatGPT, which is more of a reinforcement learning from human feedback type of model where they have layers of different do's and don'ts, whereas the constitutional AI operates a little differently. So that informs the output. It changes how the output is. And so I would encourage everybody to try multiple ones. And yes, that means subscription, but like you said, I love your term streaming wars, because I think it is AI wars right now for sure.
Yeah. What would be your top 3 to 5 to test out then? What's the grab
Yeah,
bag?
so like I said, I mentioned on my tabs, I move around the tabs to which one's the best. Always ChatGPT first, and if it gets my answer on the first try, then good. If I'm not in a rush, I'll copy and paste the prompt to 4 different ones. So it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, X, Perplexity, and then if I'm doing other things, I'll do Mistral or DeepSeek. If I'm doing like image generation, then I'll do Midjourney or Ideogram. It depends upon what I'm trying to do, or Leonardo, which is another good image generator. Yep.
Yeah. And then do you have the paid version of Chat GPT?
Yes, and anybody who doesn't is they're not serious. And if you don't have the paid version of ChatGPT, then if that's the baseline. That's you're just showing up to work. Get the ChatGPT paid version. It's $20 a month. You can stand to not have one Starbucks coffee that month or whatever.
What's the difference between the free and the paid version then? What's that delta that people are missing out on?
So there are a lot of every month they make more and more things available for free people, but some of the things I know, and I'm sorry, I might say some things that are erroneous because they change the rules all the time on me. So one of the things I like about the paid version is you can do custom instructions. So you can give it context of who you are and how you like it responding to you. Secondly, you can do memory. So you can say, remember that I'm allergic to almonds, and it will remember that when it's giving me recipes or whatever. Remember that when you generate emails, I don't want you to say best regards. I hate that, just don't do salutations this way, right? But then you can also create your own GPTs, which again, that might be in the free or the paid. They've changed that over the course. I feel like that also your token limit is more. So not token, if you start using it a lot, you'll get throttled. You'll get, you have to wait an hour with the free version, but the pay version, you get more access. I think there's a couple models you can't access under the free model, like O3 Mini High, which is a more of an advanced reasoning. You can also do temporary chat, which basically anonymizes everything you're doing, and it's not remembering any of the training on any of your prompts and outputs. So there's a lot of elements that I can get into, but there's so much functionality of this tool. Some is free, some is not, and I haven't quite gotten the line. You want to have access to everything, so you don't have anything stopping you.
And when you say it won't remember it, do you think that's true? Because to your earlier point of being able to be hacked, like, is
Yeah.
it somewhere in there and it could still be hackable? That's where I think people are still nervous on if we need help with something that's proprietary. There's a lot of different questions we have that's proprietary and internal company information. So
Yeah, so the temporary chat element, just the language from their particular website, this chat won't appear in history, use or create memories, or be used to train our models. For safety purposes, we may keep a copy for up to 30 days. So that's an example of where they will remove that history from according to this, their server. So that is the safest way if you want to do something. But even then, I would err on the side of caution. So.
Yeah. Is there any other areas where you see marketers get it really wrong when it comes to AI? There's definitely the systematic approach that you're recommending, like make it a company initiative, not just this one-off thing. Is there anything else that you'd want to tell marketers on how to best use and integrate AI?
Marketers specifically, there's a few kind of culture changes you need to have in your organization, ethos changes, strategy changes as a business owner that yourself. You know, I'll give you a parallel to lawyers are always billable hours. They're gonna have to move away from that. They're gonna have to do value-based pricing. And that value-based pricing has to do with the fact that you are much more efficient. So if you're charging based on how long it takes you to do a copyright or some blog post, then your client's going to get wise to that. And they're going to realize it doesn't take you long if you're using AI. So why are you charging me XYZ? So you need to reposition your brand, your marketing, your company that you're going to provide value to the results you're going to bring them. And the other thing I would say that they're doing wrong is being reckless with the models. Some of them are quite savvy. The marketers, and they're building automations in make.com or Zapier or N8N, like I mentioned, and they're getting lazy. And they'll basically say, have AI do this, produce the text, and not proofread it. We use AI for lots of our proposals, lots of our interactions. We take the transcripts from a call, we shove that into our pre-programmed model with all of our IP to output, whether it be custom personas for their clients or a marketing plan. But if you realize sometimes it gets things wrong, there's the name, the spelling of the client's name, something as simple as that could make you look horrible. So a lot of marketers, what they're doing wrong is they're using the tools blindly and not having human oversight. So
yeah, great for the ugly first draft, and then you got to take it from there for sure.
100%. Yep.
Awesome. I know we're coming to an end of our time, but also just wanted to ask if there is anything you wish I would have asked or talked about with our time together that I haven't.
So I'm gonna tell you one of my predictions for the marketing industry that people often don't want to hear. I'm not sure if you're familiar with MACON, the Marketing AI conference. I would say that if you're in marketing, go to MACON. You need to look into going to that particular event. It's specifically for marketers. It's specifically for how AI is being used by marketers. And there's also lots of vendors there that are really helpful. So highly recommend that particular event. At WSI's, we're probably going to have a session that we're going to be teaching there on some specific use cases. But going back to your question, what I wish you asked, I believe that the marketing and the AI kind of consulting business models are going to merge. Because what I've seen is the chief technology officer and IT people are not the ones pushing the AI narrative. The ones that clients are expecting to have all the answers are marketers. So if you already have a relationship with a client and they trust you for years for what we've been helping them with, they're already going to expect you to be the experts in AI. So you better get knowledgeable, you better get on board, because that industry is going to become one in the coming years.
Yeah. And I love the tip on the conferences, because I was actually just talking to someone, a marketer at IFA, about how they like to attend not only the franchise conferences, which are great, but outside the industry marketing conferences to be getting fresh new ideas. And especially around AI, like we know it's going to be an ongoing, not just, okay, let's binge on some articles and get up to speed this month. It's changing tomorrow. So how do you stay always on top of it? And as franchisors in the home office, we're getting that question. What are we doing to show up in search results in all of these chat GPTs and perplexities? What are we doing with our AI strategy? That question is already being asked, and we already are feeling behind the 8 ball on it. So
I can answer that one. That's a good point. We should probably answer for the people who are hearing you and listening and wondering, yeah, I want to know that answer. But before I answer that one, I want to go back to my first premise there. So the Marketing AI Institute is the institute that, or the company that puts on MACON, the Marketing AI conference. But what's interesting, just to go back to putting some proof to my point, it's used to be called the Marketing AI Institute. Now it's called the AI Institute. So they were marketers for the last 15 years. He used to own a digital marketing agency, sold it, and became the Marketing AI Institute. They have since changed their name. So what does that tell you? That tells me that I might be onto something. But going back to your question, how do I show up? I use this analogy all the time. How do I show up on a ChatGPT search, right? Which is important. You should always be not Googling your company more. You should be ChatGPTing your company and see what happens. And that should tell you a lot. And then you ask the AI to tell you, where did you get these resources? Show me the links to the data that you got. But anyway, aside from that, I always give this example. If you were to Google lawyers in Atlanta, because you want to find a lawyer, now you're going to get search generative experience, the SGE at the top. It's taking the top of the fold. Okay. That was prime real estate. Now Google said, nope, we're going to give that to our AI solutions. What you're finding 9, 10 times out of 10, that examples given there do not show up on the blue links below it. You'll see the top ranked SEO, the people that have been hacking for years, they got that seat at the top of the friggin' blue link table. I'm talking below the ads, right? They love it. They're the best. They're not showing up on the SGE results. So what does that tell you? That should tell everybody that what Google is using to create the results from the SGE is different than what they were using for the algorithm. So how do we hack it? How do we go again as marketers and be like, okay, we hacked Google before with SEO. Now we're going to hack them with SGE. And the answer to that question is, just generically speaking, I'll give you an analogy. Let's say you're a backpack company. You have a backpack website and you sell backpacks. And for years, you're doing AdWord, keyword on your post and keyword on your website. Your content said whatever the keywords are that everybody says are the key keywords. That doesn't work anymore. So long tail, people are familiar with that concept. That's almost there. So now you'll need to do a white paper or a very robust story about Erin, who loves to backpack in the AT, who loves hiking with her dog in 30-degree weather in the snow and blah, blah, blah. Like all of these elements of this story.
Quality content.
Exactly. The content has to be not just keywords, but so much content that a language model scours that and connects cold with dog, with AT, with backpacking for 5 days or more. So that when somebody asks the AI model, what's the best backpack for blah, 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 it will come up. So the problem with that is it takes time for these language models to scour just like regular models. So get on that now. So there's my answer to that question that people always ask me.
I love that tip. I'm so glad we got to that point because that is gold. And I think people are trying to wrap their brain around how to approach content development in this new world. And so a little bit related to that, there's the quality content. And then what's your hot take on how industry listicles or awards or other credible publications feed into that? Is that something that people need to be more aware of, do you think, or less? And I only ask that because I think I've noticed when looking at sources that it pulls from, whatever it is, list or guides, that's a big piece of where they're pulling from.
So I'm gonna shoot from the hip on this one and give you my gut. So I don't have any data to back this up, but this is my understanding and my expertise in language models. This is where I'm getting it from. So again, I'm not a marketer per se. I work for a large marketing company, but I myself am not a marketer. But let's just go back to the question. When you look at how you asked the question about the models and whether basically backlinks and whether you're looking at expertise that's how algorithms were before. But language models operate differently. They want to scour the page. They want to associate XYZ company with the best in that industry. So when you have, to your point, it's not going to be backlinks that helps inform the output for this particular query for the prompt that you put in. It's going to be more about, are you on a website that aligns with the request from that particular user? So if you are in the top 10 backpacks for hiking the AT, then yes, that will be one more data point to align this language model. The more you have this, so I'm going to push back to those people that say PR is not a thing. It's still a thing. It's still very relevant because but in a different way. It's not as important to have the backlinks. It's important to be associated with the terms and the language that aligns you with that particular. It's a semantic association. I could show you a 3-dimensional graph that says backpack, and then there's little lines between each one of those adjectives that you want to be associated with. And the more you can, and the more temperature for each one that you can align with your brand, the better it's going to come up. So I'm being complex here, but that's the answer. The answer is yes, but not for the same reasons as before.
Yes, and which makes sense, which it sounds like the evolution of trying to figure out that context of user intent, they're getting better at the matching than just the old school days of keyword. Like keyword stuffing is no longer a thing because it's a rudimentary way to figure out context of the user intent.
That's a brilliant insight. You're exactly right. Yep.
Awesome. Robert, I think I could probably keep picking your brain forever, and we might need to do this again. So in a month, we can talk about all the things that have changed.
Yeah, there's definitely things changing. Operators coming out, they're going to be using agents more, and they're going to be using AI to control your computer. So yeah, there's a lot of things happening for sure.
Yeah. And I know you also have your own AI Sherpa podcast. So if people want to listen in and learn more, can you share where they can listen in on that?
Yeah, Jack Munson does the Social Geek podcast, and we have a session we call the AI Sherpa podcast. So by all means, check it out. Go to his website. I post on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me, then reach out for sure.
I love it. Thank you so much, Robert. And thanks for everyone who listened in today. And we'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by NetCertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netcertive.com.